All right, so have you ever seen one of those movies where like a computer program is like writing symphonies and making coffee and predicting the future all at the same time?
Hmm.
Well, we're not going quite that deep today, but what we are looking at is still pretty amazing. And you know what the crazy thing is? You're probably already using these things called large language model agents every day
Mm.
and don't even realize it. They're popping up everywhere. Like you see them in healthcare, education, even finance. I bet they're even being used to like figure out what you should watch next on Netflix. We found this really interesting research paper that basically gives us a peek behind the curtain of how all this works. It's like we get a backstage pass to the AI revolution, but without all the Hollywood special effects and stuff. So instead of like robots taking over the world, well, what are we really talking about here?
Yeah, so it's easy to think that these large language models are just like super fancy chatbots. But that's kind of like saying that a brain is just a really good dictionary. I mean, sure, they use language, but they can do so much more than that. They can look at information and plan things out and solve problems, almost like a digital version of thinking.
Okay, so it's not just about like spitting out words, they're actually figuring things out. The research paper mentions some really cool examples, like there are some being developed that can help doctors analyze medical data so they can help with like making diagnoses. Or imagine this, you could have agents that create custom lesson plans for students and they adapt to like how each student learns best. That's pretty amazing. Now I'm curious, how do these things actually learn anything? Do they have like some kind of digital brain inside?
Well, you've hit on a really important point here. These agents actually have different kinds of memory, just like we do. They have a short-term memory for like what's happening right now in a conversation or a task. And then they have a long-term memory where they store all the facts and things they've learned to do. And just like us, it's this memory that lets them get better over time.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So they're like little digital brains in a way.
Mm.
But the paper also mentions them using tools. Now, I'm picturing a little AI hold a tiny hammer,
Yeah.
but I'm guessing it's not quite like that.
Haha, not quite. Although I like that image. Think of tools more like the agent being able to connect to other computer programs and systems. They can use something called APIs, which are like messengers that let different programs talk to each other. And they can also run code, which
Yeah.
is basically like giving them instructions. They can even use specialized software that's made for very specific jobs.
So like an agent could use an API to check the weather and then tell me to take an umbrella.
Exactly. That's a simple example. But it shows you the basic idea. Now imagine scaling that up to something like analyzing financial markets or even controlling a robot in a factory. It gets pretty powerful pretty quickly.
Okay, so we've got memory and tools, but how does it all come together? How does an agent actually get something done?
Well, the paper walks us through the typical workflow, and it's actually pretty intuitive. It starts with planning. The agent figures out what it needs to do to reach its goal. Then it might break that goal down into smaller steps, and then it's all about action, actually doing those steps. It gets feedback on how things went, and then adjusts its plan based on what it learned. It's this constant loop of planning, doing, learning, and refining.
Interesting. So it's not just a one and done thing. It's constantly trying to improve.
Exactly. And this iterative process where the agent is always refining its approach is one of the things that lets it handle really complex tasks.
So let's talk about some real-world applications here. The paper highlights some fascinating examples, especially in healthcare.
Absolutely. Healthcare is a perfect example of where these agents are showing a ton of promise. We're already seeing them being used to analyze patient data, helping doctors with potential diagnoses. They can even suggest treatment plans based on the latest research. And there's even the potential for them to automate some of the more routine tasks that doctors and nurses have to do that frees up their time to focus on the more complex cases.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
But using these agents in healthcare, especially when we're talking about diagnosis and treatment, must come with some serious considerations, right?
Yes, you're absolutely right. The stakes are high in healthcare. So it's crucial to make sure that any technology we use is safe and reliable. Developing these agents in the medical field has to go hand in hand with rigorous testing and oversight from medical professionals.
It sounds like we're still in the early stages, but the potential is huge. Now, the paper also mentioned finance as another area where these agents are making a big impact.
Oh, definitely. Finance is definitely ripe for disruption. Think about things like risk analysis and fraud detection. These are areas where these agents can sift through tons of data and spot patterns that humans might miss.
So it's like having an army of superpowered analysts working 24/7.
That's a good way to put it. And it's not just about spotting patterns. They can also learn to make predictions based on past data, which is incredibly valuable in finance.
So could you imagine one of these agents managing your investments? Like a robo-advisor, but on steroids.
It's not just imaginable. It's already happening. There are companies out there building agents that can track market trends, figure out how much risk you're comfortable with, and even make trades based on what they learn.
Okay, that's both impressive and a little bit scary. But it definitely shows you how these agents are changing things in finance. And it's not just healthcare and finance, right? The paper mentioned a bunch of other areas where these agents are showing up.
You're right. We're seeing them in education where they can personalize learning for students, and even in creative fields like music and writing. They can help artists come up with new ideas and explore different creative directions.
It's amazing to think about all the different ways they can be used. But I have to admit, this technology is also a little bit intimidating. It feels like it could impact every part of our lives.
I understand that feeling. It's new and powerful, and we're still learning about it. But that's exactly why it's so important to understand how these agents work and what they're good at, and also where we need to be careful.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but we're just getting started. We'll be back in a moment to dive even deeper into the world of large language model agents.
And as we get deeper into these large language model agents, there's one thing that really struck me in this research paper. It's just the huge range of things they could potentially do. I mean, we've talked about healthcare and finance, but it goes way beyond that.
It really does. The paper even talks about these agents being used for creative stuff,
Yeah.
like writing music and stories. It's almost like they're going to become like AI muses.
Yeah, it's not as crazy as it sounds. Think about like an agent that could analyze how you write. It could suggest plot twists, or even write whole paragraphs based on your ideas. Or in music, imagine an agent that could compose melodies and create harmonies. It could even come up with completely new instruments based on what you like.
That's wild. I mean, it makes you wonder if we'll even need human artists in the future. Are these agents just going to take over creativity completely?
That's a big question, and it's something a lot of people are thinking about right now. But I think it's really important to remember that at their core, these agents are tools. They can help us be more creative, but they're not going to replace human creativity.
So instead of seeing them as competition, we should think of them as partners, like working with them in the creative process.
Exactly. I think the most exciting things will happen when you bring human creativity together with these really powerful agents. We bring our own perspectives and feelings and experiences, and the agents can give us totally new ideas and ways to express them, things we never would have thought of on our own.
I like that. It's not about agents versus humans. It's about agents and humans working together to see what's possible.
Yeah, and speaking of pushing boundaries, the research paper also talks about some pretty futuristic applications of these agents, stuff that almost sounds like science fiction. One that I found really interesting was using them to design and manage entire virtual worlds.
Wait a minute. Are we talking about creating like our own matrix? Is that even something that could actually happen?
Well, it's still very much in the realm of speculation, but the idea is fascinating. Imagine agents that could design landscapes and create characters. They could write stories and even manage the economies and social dynamics of these virtual worlds.
So we'd be like players in these worlds. And the agents would be the game masters, making sure everything runs smoothly and creating a super immersive experience.
Exactly. And these worlds wouldn't just be for entertainment. They could be used for education training research. I mean, the possibilities are practically endless.
It's mind-blowing to think about. But it also makes you think about the ethical side of things. I mean, who's in control of these virtual worlds? And what happens if something goes wrong?
You're bringing up some really important points. As we start exploring these uncharted territories, it's so important that we talk openly about the ethical implications. We need to have clear rules and make sure someone's accountable. We have to address potential risks before these technologies become widely available.
So it's not just about being impressed by the technology. It's about understanding the responsibility that comes with it.
Exactly. Innovation should always go hand in hand with ethical considerations. We need to be thoughtful about how we develop and use these agents, making sure they're aligned with our values and that they're used for the benefit of humanity.
Well said. I think that's a really important message for everyone to hear. But before we move on, there's one more thing from the research that I wanted to touch on. It really resonated with me. It's the idea that these agents could actually help us understand ourselves better.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the most fascinating aspects of this whole field. By studying how these agents learn and reason and make decisions, we can get new insights into how our own minds work.
So it's almost like we're looking in a mirror, but the mirror is made of AI.
That's a great way to put it. And it goes beyond just understanding how we think. These agents can also help us explore our emotions and biases. even our creativity in ways we never could before.
It's like having a digital therapist, but one that can also help you write a symphony or design a virtual world.
Uh-huh, exactly. It's a pretty remarkable combination of technology and human potential.
Okay, so we've talked about all the incredible potential of these agents, but we've also talked about the need to be careful and to think about the ethical side of things. So where does that leave us? What's the next step?
Well, I think the most important thing is to stay informed and engaged. This technology is evolving so quickly, and it's going to have a major impact on everyone's life. We need to be part of the conversation, asking tough questions, demanding transparency, and shaping the future of these agents in a way that benefits everyone.
So it's not about being afraid of the technology, it's about understanding it and making sure it's used responsibly.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, and the more we understand about these agents, the better prepared we'll be to navigate this exciting and sometimes challenging future.
Well, that's a great point to keep in mind. We've only scratched the surface of this topic, but hopefully this has given our listeners a good starting point to learn more.
You know, one of the things that really blew my mind in this paper was the idea of these agents not just talking to us, but talking to each other. Like, what if they could actually have their own conversations and share information?
Whoa, hold on. That's getting a little too sci-fi for me. What would that even look like?
Yeah.
Like, are we talking about robots gossiping about their human overlords?
Not quite. But imagine you have a bunch of these agents, each one specializing in something different. Like one's an expert in climate modeling, another one knows all about urban planning, and a third one is focused on renewable energy. They could all talk to each other, share data, and work together to solve big problems like climate change.
So it's like having a whole team of AI experts brainstorming and working together 24/7.
Exactly. And it's not just about problem solving. They could learn from each other too, constantly improving their models and getting better at what they do.
Okay, and that's both amazing and kind of terrifying. What if they start learning so fast that we can't even keep up?
It's a valid concern. That's why it's so important to think about transparency and control. We need to be able to understand how they're making decisions and what they're learning from each other.
So we don't accidentally create a super intelligent AI that we can't understand.
Exactly. We need to be proactive about shaping how these agents develop and make sure they're always aligned with our values and goals.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a huge responsibility.
It is.
Yeah.
And it all comes back to ethics. We can't just focus on what these agents can do. We have to think about how they do it and what the implications are.
So it's not just about being impressed by the technology. It's about using it wisely.
Exactly.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. From digital brains to virtual worlds to the ethics of AI, it's been quite a journey.
It has.
But I think the biggest takeaway for me is that this technology is still in its early stages, and we have a chance to shape its future.
Absolutely.
So to all our listeners out there, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged. Because the future of AI is something we're all creating together, and it's up to us to make sure it's a future that benefits everyone. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of large language model agents. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.